Welcome to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast, a fascinating and inspiring journey into the world of venture capital and startups. Each episode offers masterclasses and entrepreneurial stories from some of the top minds in the innovation economy. Get ready to unlock new ideas and gain valuable advice for how to thrive as an innovator and an investor. On this episode of Extraordinary Pursuits, we are talking to Dr. Malcolm Muhammad about how support communities for entrepreneurs are evolving and what it means for anyone who is thinking about or working on building a new business. Malcolm serves as the Vice President of Engagement and Outcomes at the Russell Innovations Center for Entrepreneurs, otherwise known as RICE. It's an economic mobility engine that provides Black entrepreneurs and small business owners with the resources that they need to innovate and grow and build wealth. And in his day-to-day work, Malcolm focuses his efforts and his experience on unlocking the full potential of RICE's community of entrepreneurs, as well as managing a powerful evidence-based framework for scaling Black businesses. So on this episode, Malcolm is going to share his experience and his perspective on entrepreneurial support organizations and what it means to be an accountable entrepreneur in an environment where the number of resources available are only growing day by day. So let's get started. Malcolm, thank you for joining us. We are so glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So I would love to get started just with a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about, how did you get to this point? And let's talk a little bit about your role at the Russell Center at Rice.
Absolutely. So my path down this journey of entrepreneurship, it always starts with my family background. So I always go back to the story of my dad. He's a baker, still a baker to this day in Detroit. And I always go back to the story of riding around with him, making deliveries to different coffee shops and food stores around Detroit. And so I always tell people entrepreneurship was ingrained in me at a very, very young age. So for me, it was always just about what that was going to look like. It wasn't about what I was going to do per se. I knew it was going to be something to do with entrepreneurship. And so I finished, college and did all of that good stuff. And I was just looking for my path and my way. And I always been like a curious intellectual person. Another way to say that, I was always good at school, a little bit of a nerd. So I saw that as my asset, and eventually I decided to take that down the path of pursuing my doctoral degree, which never was part of my plans, but it ended up being the perfect setup for me. Got me to the Russell Center. And now, building on what you said, all of my work is dedicated to really the specific details of what it takes to grow and scale a business from an evidence-based, scientific perspective. And not at the point, probably never will be at the point where I say I got it all figured out. But I enjoyed, the journey of trying to, figure out what it is that moves the needle for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, there's so much in just what you've said that, first of all, your dad must be so proud of you. That is it's what a great story. And I think you're not alone. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have it in their blood. I think somebody should do a genetic study because, I was an entrepreneur. My dad is an entrepreneur. I think there are some of us who are raised not to be able to work for other people very well, and you really nailed on something else as well. And I think that it might be a through line to the conversation we're going to have. And it is that sort of intellectual curiosity and being comfortable, not necessarily knowing where that intellectual curiosity might take you, but preparing yourself for it. And one of the things that really struck me when you and I met at the Russell Center was that that curiosity of yours, it shines through. And the fact that you are able to use that for the good of an organization and of other entrepreneurs who are looking at ways to answer big questions and solve big problems, and are really kind of seeking the right ways to do that, the right resources to do that. It's very clear to me that, you've kind of taken your superpower and applied it, for the good of others. And I just think that that's really cool. I'd love to dig a little bit more deeply into the specifics of what the Russell Center is doing, particularly through your perspective of it being an entrepreneurial environment. This is a great opportunity for you to sort of talk about this very special community and organization. So, tell us a little bit more about Russell Center, and maybe a little bit more about some of the data that you are looking at that is continuing to fuel the growth of that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the couple things I got to piggyback on that you said too, right? Like those genetic studies in entrepreneurship are definitely already happening, right? So
Oh, cool.
I encourage you and whoever else to look into that if that interests you. I know Scott Shane is a big researcher that's looking into that, and I'm sure several others. And then I don't want to leave out my mom either. My mom was a big piece too. I would hate for her to watch this and not hear that shout out too. So shout out to my mom. She was
Shout
interior
out to Mom.
design entrepreneur in her own right too. But yeah,
Awesome.
into your question, right? So for me, Russell Center in general revolves around the curriculum, right? So we have kind of built our program and our community around this big ideas framework, being a stage based learning continuum, right? And when I say stages, I'm referring to ideas as an acronym where the beginning stage being inspire, and then you can move through those stages: inspire, develop, execute, accelerate, scale. And really just trying to get at this idea of targeting educational content and materials specifically towards where an individual is in their stage of business. And that's no easy feat, right? Again, I won't sit here and say we got it all figured out, but as a guiding light, it's been great for us to really try to break down where an entrepreneur is in their current life cycle. And so some of the new things that we're learning, right? In Atlanta and even outside of Atlanta, a lot of as we get into more of the conversation around entrepreneurship support, a lot of the support that exists expects you to already be at a certain threshold, right? As an entrepreneur, you're expected to meet certain criteria and certain conditions and certain circumstances. I think at the Russell Center, we're really leaning into an important niche that says, if you have just an ambition or an idea or a desire to be an entrepreneur, come to us and we can help you conceptualize that idea. And then we'll worry about growing and scaling and what it takes to be this, whatever it is you want to be in business. But I think it's an important, kind of gap that we're filling. And that's what we call that inspire stage, right? Is, I want to be an entrepreneur. I got this kind of, not fully formed idea. I don't really know what to do with it. I don't know what steps I need to take. And we welcome, those entrepreneurs, right? Because there's not enough spaces for people like that just need help, making that first step and taking that first action and prioritizing and making sure that they are effective at those, very, very early stages. So for us, we're really looking at our CEO, Jay Bailey. You know him, you all got a good relationship. And anybody who's ever heard him speak, he certainly will move the crowd, right? But his big thing is in our, first three stages: inspire, develop, execute. That should be a checklist, right? That should be something that, if you're a startup business, that you need to have a headshot, a bio. You need to know that you have your problem defined. Things that are across the board apply to any business, right? Are the things that we want to make sure once you come out the execute stage, you have all of the foundations checked. And then then we can talk about acceleration, right? That's when we get into our very specific programs targeted towards, revenue growth, targeted towards scaling, acquiring contracts, all the things that's going to take you to another level in business, that are, again, a little bit more specific to industry, to business model, to things like that, where they need that targeted expertise. And so from my perspective as the researcher behind it, we got to get really good at, being able to validate and verify. Once you go through those first three kind of early stages, you truly are prepared for whatever type of opportunity comes your way. And that's that's what we're in the middle of right now is just trying to, finalize that piece of what does it mean to finish that execute stage and be ready to accelerate down whatever path you need to go to reach your growth goals for your business. And I'm, very excited about the work we're in right now, developing really rigorous assessments, right? Like I think as we talk more about accountability, right, it's not meant to be easy. I think a lot of times the resources and services provided in entrepreneurship support make it seem like we're supposed to be making it easier for entrepreneurs when that's really not the case. Like we need to be making sure they're ready to succeed and perform in the market. And so being able to assess the capability to do that is what we're, very, intensely focused on right now at the Russell Center.
So, Rice, from everything you're telling us, from the way in which the community is constructed to the framework to all of the elements of support, is a great example of an ESO. And I know that this is something that you are well knowledgeable and studied in, but it may be a term that's unfamiliar to some of our listeners. So could you please explain what an ESO is and how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that you'll find in research on entrepreneurship is that these definitions always tend to be like a little bit fuzzy, and it's because everything in entrepreneurship tends to be like very complex, right? So entrepreneurship support has got a lot of different directions you can go with that, but essentially for me, I look at it as a intermediary organization. So someone sitting in between like the resources that entrepreneurs need and the actual entrepreneurs. And their entire role is to make sure that the right resources get connected with the entrepreneurs that need them, right? And so there's a lot of different configurations that can take. You got accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces, maker spaces, universities, a place like Rice that don't like to fit into any one of those definitions, but like to be a blend of all of them. And even in a lot of instances, venture capital firms can tend to operate like entrepreneurship support organizations. So I think it's all about that matchmaking piece between what are the resources that exist in our local environment, and how can I make sure that they get to the entrepreneurs in our environment or ecosystem, right? That's the term we tend to use. But just being a institution in the ecosystem that is there to serve entrepreneurs and connect them to resources and connect them to opportunities, being the kind of the general definition that you can break down a lot of different ways.
Okay, so with that in mind, yeah, they are plentiful.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like a categorical kind of definition. Are ESOs tending to be situated in any particular pockets? I mean, I know in VC, a lot of times you kind of just expect that they're mostly coastal. And then there might be some in the Midwest, but there are definitely underserved pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Knowing that ESO tends to be a little bit of a broader categorical kind of description. Do you see that being the case? Are there areas where founders can really expect that they'll find more of those resources or better versions of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think this concept of ESOs has evolved kind of in parallel with just the concept of ecosystems in general, right? Because if you think about kind of the very beginning of that conceptualization, it was a lot. It revolved a lot around Silicon Valley or the Boston area, and then later stages the Miami area and the startup activity that was going on there. And I think ESOs has kind of followed that same path, but even right now, I think my belief is that you can go to any city in America and really across the world at this point, and you will find some type of initiative or effort or energy around promoting entrepreneurship, right? And so in that regard, you'll find ESOs pretty much everywhere you go. I think the differentiator is the quality and or the amount of resources that they have to provide or to connect entrepreneurs with, and I think that's where you'll see the variation. Still in those pockets that you talk about where you'll get the highest quality ESOs or VCs or accelerators still maybe on the West Coast or on the East Coast, or in places like Miami. But I think that again, this accountability piece, right? Where that doesn't mean that if I'm in a rural area, the ESOs in my area are valueless, right? It just means that I have to figure out how to leverage what is in my backyard, what is in my ecosystem to help me grow my business. And even if it means moving to a different ecosystem, right? Taking that into account as well. But to me, it all circles back to that accountability piece, right? You got to use what you have access to.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like what you're saying is that, ESOs like venture capital firms, or, if you want to just even think about an individual, incubator or accelerator space, we've got a number of those, even just in Atlanta. It takes a little bit of that. How mature is it? How
Hmm.
many resources have been poured into it? How long have they been able to look at the companies that are coming in and going out? And how long have those companies endured?
Hmm.
Have they gone on to be unicorns or,
Yeah.
successful small businesses? As you sort of look at the ESO model and you maybe look at some of them that are a bit more mature, and a little bit maybe more well-rounded. And I think Rice is probably a great example of this because it is so multifaceted. Can you look at different components of an ESO and say this is what is most meaningful? So if you have a founder, for example, who is in a slightly less served market and they're trying to assess the value of what is available to them, should they focus on the other people who are there, access to mentoring, access to capital? I mean, what are the components that you think or can prove with all of your research, really make an ESO successful for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as you were first starting to ask that question, I was thinking about, of course, my bias being the evidence, right? So, what are the outcomes that are proven that they've been able to produce by supporting entrepreneurs? But as you kept explaining, I'm thinking from the perspective of the entrepreneur. That's maybe not necessarily the most important piece, right? It's not about the evidence that the ESO is effective, but you should be looking for the evidence that they can be effective for you, right?
Mm.
So I'm thinking about I've given a talk before about ESOs and I compared it to product market fit for an entrepreneur is the same as product market fit for ESO, right? So do they have resources and opportunities targeted to your specific type of business, the industry that you're in? So it comes back. I'm sounding like a broken record, but that accountability piece, right? Knowing what type of business you are, what type of customers you serve, what your goals are, where what types of milestones are you working towards, what resources do you need, what type of mentors do you need to connect with, and then that way you can evaluate what exists against what your exact needs are instead of kind of the trial and error approach of just which is nothing wrong with, right? If you're just out engaging in different places just trying to see what sticks, there's likely a lot of merit to that and a lot of value to be found in that. But if you can evaluate a space based on your specific needs and what you are seeking in terms of the growth of your business, that'll take you a long way in terms of evaluating the ESOs that are a good fit for your business.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the product market fit comparison is a really apt one. So
Mhm.
you've brought up accountability a few times, and I think it's a really important through line. On both sides, right? The ESO
Mhm.
should be accountable to their community, and
Right.
the entrepreneurs should be accountable to the resources that they're, having access to. Um, are there any challenges? There are a lot of these organizations popping up. And
Right.
we've talked a little bit about, how do you choose the right one for you? And we've talked about accountability. Let's flip that over and talk about that accountability for entrepreneurs. I mean, do you see that that's a particular challenge for entrepreneurs who are presented with all of these opportunities to have support?
I do. I think my conclusion thus far is that accountability, if I had to choose, would probably be one of the main kind of differentiating factors between the entrepreneurs that I see, grow and hit the success that they're looking for, and those that tend to struggle. Right? I think that's one good candidate of the main differentiator, because and it's almost accountability. The way I'm talking about it is almost like a delusional thing, right? Because certain things do happen that are not in your control, right? We know that in entrepreneurship, and especially in entrepreneurship, right? And so to be able to find accountability in things that are not necessarily your fault sometimes, that takes a little bit of a delusion, right? But I think that is the place where entrepreneurs find their perseverance, they find their creativity, they find their innovation to overcome barriers and obstacles and adversity, no matter what the cause, or who's to blame for it, right? So being able to find what you can learn, what you can do better in any situation, I tend to see those entrepreneurs are the ones that can overcome, the ones that can appreciate whatever resources or support they come in contact with, as opposed to the other side of that um, being expecting certain things and not getting them, feeling maybe entitled at certain points to, or feeling inclined to blame the struggles of your business on certain outside circumstances, right? And you can bring any entrepreneur on this podcast. They all struggle, right? They're all gonna go through things. They're all gonna have challenges. So it's about how do you face them, right? So even in my role as a professor of entrepreneurship, any course you take in entrepreneurship, one of the first things they talk about is going to be mindset, and within that is going to be how do you react to failure, right? So that's another way we can kind of couch this idea of accountability, right? Is are you taking accountability for what can be deemed a failure, and that means are you willing to learn from it and apply it towards the continual growth of your business, or are you blaming that failure on somebody else and letting that be a obstacle that you can't overcome? And so I really, truly, the more I observe these entrepreneurs, think that's like one of the main differences that determine, your growth trajectory, is how do you look at those challenges and those barriers, and are you taking accountability for them or not?
Yeah, I think that that's such a good point, and I find it a little ironic that we start out, with this conversation talking about, these external resources, and what I'm hearing you say is that intrinsic motivation and that desire, that intellectual curiosity, and that willingness to approach your learning opportunities with humility. All of those things are very, inside out and not coming from the outside in. But what I hear you saying is that there's actually a really strong interplay between the two that will determine whether or not someone is successful inside this kind of structure and this opportunity. Am I hearing that correctly?
Absolutely. I mean, even the title entrepreneurial support organization, right? Is they exist to support, right? It is not to do it for you. It's not to give you the strategy. It's not to create the idea for you. It's not to build the business for you. It's for support, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's your job as the entrepreneur to make sure that you're leveraging the environment the right way towards the growth of your business. And as you mentioned, as mobile as everybody is these days, if you feel like your ecosystem doesn't fit for your business, do you consider, moving somewhere else? Where I mean, I know entrepreneurs that have moved based solely on being in an environment that better suits the growth of their business, right? So that's I see that as like extreme accountability, right? I'm putting myself in position to be able to leverage the right environment for me instead of focusing on what's wrong about the environment that I'm in.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. I think this sounds a little bit like it could be a really useful parenting podcast as well. So thank you for that. And also, I think we buried a little bit of the lead in that you actually teach entrepreneurial studies. And so
Mhm.
I would love to spend our last few minutes kind of tapping your professor brain. And let's just think of our audience as a classroom of students.
Mhm.
Can you provide some insights or some tips for ways that entrepreneurs should work to maintain accountability, particularly when they're gifted with such a robust, list of support systems.
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about the intrinsic motivation, right? So I think the first thing would be to tap into that, right? Because at Georgia State, our introductory course to entrepreneurship is all about entrepreneurial thinking, right? So it really has nothing to do specifically with helping you build a business, right? It's about how do you think like an entrepreneur, right? And that comes along with a lot of things that you can control emotionally, mentally, psychologically on your own, that are going to kind of provide structure for you as you grow and build your business, right? So you could think about knowing your why, right? Things that we've all heard before, right? Knowing your why, what's driving you beyond making money, beyond building the product that seems cool. What problem are you solving? What is actually keeping you passionate or keeping you purposeful about building a business, right? What's the ultimate success look like for you beyond how much money you can make or how cool your business can look? What impact are you looking to have, right? So that's intrinsic, right? That's something that can, if you can stay attached to that rather than being attached to the product or the solution, that's something that'll keep you, help keep you able to persevere throughout your journey, right? So there's that piece, and then just the idea of being a learner, right? So being somebody that constantly pays attention, is alert, is aware of what's going on around them, can see opportunities, and then can sit down and reflect, right? So I think one of my biggest pieces of life advice to my friends know I love to give life advice unsolicited, right? So one of my biggest pieces is, to really enjoy solitude, right? Um, and I think in entrepreneurship, that's important because it gives you time to reflect, because our minds can be on go all the time, just constantly thinking of, well, what problem I need to solve today? How can I get better? How can I grow? What do I need to do? What's my task list look like? It's never ending, right? That work never ends, never truly ends. But can I take time to rest and reset, take a break, reflect, allow my subconscious mind to be creative for me while I, blank out or break away from everything. And I think the benefits of that are, hard to explain until you actually do it and start to see how taking breaks and being mindful allows you to reflect on your business and strategize more effectively. Um, and then just I think it's leverage, right? And it builds off of that awareness piece. So like recognizing opportunities, especially in entrepreneurship research, is always a big piece of the definition of entrepreneurship. Being able to recognize what is valuable from a situation, from a collection of circumstances that you can take advantage of as an entrepreneur and capture value from, right? So being able to pay attention to that relates directly to ESOs, right? I recognize if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a Black entrepreneur in Atlanta and I have nothing but an idea, I recognize the opportunity to go to the Russell Center because there's not a whole lot of other places that are going to take me in at this very, very early stage when I don't have anything but an idea, right? So can you recognize what opportunities exist and not say, I'm not getting this, and this from this ESO, but recognize what you are getting and how can you apply what you are getting to the growth of your business, right? So you can't go anywhere and expect every single thing you learn and every single program and opportunity to provide significant value. But you can be, appreciative and be grateful for the things that do provide value and make sure that you actually capture that value from it, by recognizing the opportunities and being open minded.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think you said something there in those tips, and what an incredibly valuable just sort of list of advice for entrepreneurs, and especially early stage entrepreneurs. And I think so many founders think that the hard thing about being a founder, being a startup leader, being an entrepreneur is going to be like, okay, how do I take an idea and turn it into an innovation?
Mm-hmm.
How do I take, an idea and wrap a business model around it, right?
Hmm.
Those are very difficult. How do I find funding? Like that is going to be difficult. You mentioned, how do I find an environment that will take me in and allow me to grow my business before the business is anything but the
Hmm.
back of a napkin or a
Yep.
spark in my mind. But I think the thing you really hit on is the hardest thing. And that is that ability just to stop
Hmm.
and to notice and
Yep.
to process like, okay, this is what the environment is telling me. This is how I can show up with it. This is how I am a part of something bigger. Because at the end of the day, entrepreneurs are not building businesses, they're solving problems, and they're creating better situations in the world. And to your incredibly well made point, without an ability to sit in solitude and to look around and to orient yourself in all of that, I don't think it's even possible to begin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a true mental challenge to decide you want to build a business from scratch, right? That's borderline crazy a little bit. We gotta say that you got to be a little bit crazy to want to take on this journey of entrepreneurship, right? So recognizing that and acknowledging that, you got to take care of your mind, right, and make sure that you keep it fresh, keep it ready to pursue and recognize innovative opportunities. And I want to, kind of touch on another thing you said, right? Just this idea of experimentation, right? Because I think another through line that's been, kind of talked about in our conversation is uh, being open minded, right? So I think that it's important to, as you're developing your ideas, make sure that you're challenging assumptions and even your own deep rooted assumptions, that you're not taking anything for granted, and that you're willing to change your mind, and you're willing to recognize when everything you thought of and everything that you believed might be different about your business, and be willing to pivot, right? Even to me, that's about mindset. That's about being accountable and not about anything that you can put on anybody else. So being willing to be flexible and humble enough to not let your pride keep you attached to any particular component of your business is another, I think, key point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And as a business scales and you maybe take on funding or you have a board, if you don't have that skill, that ability to listen and to process like, oh no, this is a really good idea and I am going to pivot, you're not going to have funding or a board very long, and or a market, because the market is going to tell you, hey, yeah, you've got something here or you don't. So
Mhm.
that's a really great landing point. So I am going to bring us back to where we started,
Okay.
as kind of our closing question. And that is just your opinion. Do you think that the entrepreneurial drive is innate, or is it learned through EOSs and other such, resource environments? Or is it maybe a mix of the both?
I would say it's a mix. I look at it as like when if I was to define what the entrepreneurial drive is, it's that you see the circumstances around you and you just deeply believe that it should be different, right? Like you think that the way things are not the way they ought to be, and you want to take action to change those things, right? And so I think that can be somewhat innate, right, from an early age, where you just look around and say something's not right about how this world operates. But I think that also could come from experience, right? Like time after time, doing different things, learning new things, trying new things, and then just kind of learning over time that something different should be existing in this space, right? And I think either way, you get to that point where you're driven to bring about a reality that doesn't exist yet through your business. And I think that drive, I think it can be innate, but I think also it can be learned too.
That's awesome. That's a great landing point. Um, Thank you, Malcolm, so much for just an interesting and delightful conversation, but also an incredibly useful one. Um, where can people find you if they want to engage with you?
Yeah, I'm at the Russell Center almost every single day. So check out our website, russellcenter.org. I'm also continuously creating content and going to start posting more on LinkedIn. So you can find me there on LinkedIn as well, Malcolm Muhammad. Um, and yeah, those are the main two places.
Okay, that's awesome. We'll keep it real easy and we'll make sure that that information is in the show notes. Um, could not thank you enough. I hope that the founders who have had the opportunity to hear this will walk away with at least one great gem. I know I certainly have. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Rachel. It's been a pleasure. It's always good talking to you, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast. Check the show notes on our blog for the resources we discussed. You can find Extraordinary Pursuits on your favorite audio platform. Be sure to subscribe to the BIP Ventures YouTube channel and connect with us on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram so you get all the stories, learnings, and ideas for ways to thrive in the innovation economy. And if you liked this episode, be generous. Share it.